My girlfriend said, I'm pregnant, and demanded I buy them a house and marry her right now. I agreed, hoping it would be fine. But one phone call changed everything, ruining all my plans and shocking me beyond belief. Olivia told me she was pregnant again. I had no idea she was about to weaponize the memory of my lost child to get everything she wanted. To truly understand that twisted deception, we have to go back. Back to the first time she said those words, a moment that shattered me, and unknowingly, gave her the blueprint for pure manipulation. Ethan and Olivia had been together for nearly 4 years when the first pregnancy happened. Up until then, everything felt normal, even good. We were comfortable, talking about a future, but never in a rush. There was just one thing Olivia had always been crystal clear about: kids. She didn't want them. Not now, not in 5 years, maybe not ever. She made sure I understood that from the start. She was on birth control, took it religiously with her coffee every morning. Whenever the topic of children came up with friends or family, she'd politely smile and say, "We're just not there yet." But I knew what she really meant. The problem? I did want kids. Always had. I hoped maybe she'd change her mind over time, or at least be open to the conversation. But I never pushed it. I loved her, and I figured we had plenty of time. Then, one day in late September, Olivia came home from work looking utterly pale. She barely acknowledged me, just walked straight into the bathroom and closed the door. 20 minutes later, she emerged, holding a pregnancy test. Her eyes met mine with an expression I'd never seen before, somewhere between shock and raw fear. She simply said, "I'm pregnant." I swear, my brain just stopped. For a second. My first reaction was pure, unadulterated joy. The kind of happiness that makes your chest feel like it's going to explode. Immediately, my mind raced. Cribs, baby names, how we'd tell our families. I was already mentally rearranging my entire life to make room for this child. I asked her how it happened. She said she'd forgotten her pill a couple of times the month before, stressed at work, it just slipped her mind. Honestly, I didn't care how it happened. I was just thrilled it did. I told her we should get married, that I wanted to do this right. We needed to start looking at houses, our apartment was way too small. I kept repeating, "We're going to be amazing parents," like I was trying to convince both of us this was real. But Olivia didn't react the way I expected. No tears of joy, no laughter, not even a smile. She just looked absolutely exhausted. "I need some time to process this," she said, then went to bed at 7 that evening. For the next few days, I was on cloud 9. I started researching baby gear, devouring real estate listings online, even called my mom to tell her she was going to be a grandmother. But Olivia was different. Distant, quiet. Almost like a ghost moving through our apartment. Every time I tried to talk about the pregnancy, I'd get one-word answers or a swift change of subject. I tried to convince myself she was just scared, that this was a normal reaction to an unplanned pregnancy. So, I tried to be supportive, gave her space. But deep down, this weird, unexplainable tension was growing between us. Then, about 2 weeks later, Olivia started bleeding. At first, she thought it was normal, some spotting common in early pregnancy. But it worsened throughout the day. By nightfall, we were in the emergency room. The doctor performed an ultrasound, and I will never forget the look on his face when he slowly turned the screen away. He said, so gently, "I'm sorry, but there's no heartbeat." Just like that, it was over. Olivia had a miscarriage. We lost the baby. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out everything that mattered. I cried in that hospital room. I'm not ashamed to say it. I cried harder than I'd cried about anything in my entire life. When I looked over at Olivia, she was crying too. But something about it felt off. Like she was crying because she should, not because she was truly devastated the way I was. We went home that night in complete silence. For weeks, I was an absolute mess. I couldn't focus at work. I barely ate. I kept replaying all the things that would never happen now, the first steps, the first words, teaching my child to ride a bike. All of it gone, before it even began. Olivia seemed sad, yes, but not broken. Not like me. After about a month, she was completely back to normal, like nothing had ever happened. Like we hadn't just lost a child. I tentatively brought up trying again someday. She shut it down instantly. "Ethan," she said, "I don't think I'm ready for that." When I asked when she might be, she just shrugged and changed the subject. We'd talked about getting married before, nothing concrete, but it was in the air. After the miscarriage, I thought maybe we'd move forward, heal together. But Olivia wanted to wait, said we both needed time to process. I agreed. I was too emotionally destroyed to argue. What I didn't realize then, what I couldn't possibly have known, was that while I was grieving the loss of a child I had already loved, Olivia was watching me. Carefully. Studying my every move. She saw how quickly I'd been willing to change my entire life, how eager I was to buy a house, get married, give her everything she could possibly need. All because of a baby. And somewhere in her mind, during those weeks when I was falling apart, she started to understand something profound. She realized that a pregnancy, real or not, was the ultimate key to getting exactly what she wanted from me. And if she ever needed to use that key again, she'd know exactly how to turn it. I spent months trying to rebuild myself after that loss, therapy, talking to friends, doing everything I could to find some peace. But Olivia moved on much faster. Almost like she'd never really been affected. And now I finally understand why. Looking back, it all clicks. While I was mourning a child, processing genuine grief, she was taking notes. Planning her next move. Figuring out how to use my pain against me. The worst part is, I never saw it coming. Not until it was almost too late, until she'd nearly gotten everything she wanted and I'd nearly lost everything that mattered. About 7 months after the miscarriage, just when I was finally starting to feel like myself again, Olivia came to me with news that made my heart stop. In the best and worst way possible. She told me she was pregnant again. This time, her face looked different. Not scared or distant like before, but serious, almost determined. Like she'd made peace with something big. My first instinct was caution. I couldn't survive that pain again. But then I looked into her eyes. I saw what I thought were tears of genuine emotion. All my defenses crumbled. I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, we were getting a second chance. I asked if she was sure. She nodded. Said she'd taken 3 tests over the past week, all positive. When I asked how it happened, she told me she'd been thinking a lot about what we lost, realized she didn't want to live with regret. So, she'd stopped taking her birth control a few months ago. Without telling me. Because she wanted it to be a surprise. I should have questioned that immediately. I should have asked why she'd keep something so huge from me, especially after everything we'd been through. But instead, I just hugged her. Told her everything would be different this time. We would be okay. This was our second chance. The next few days were honestly beautiful. We told our families together. Everyone was thrilled, but also nervous, given what happened before. Olivia seemed more engaged this time, more present. Like she was genuinely excited about becoming a mother instead of terrified. But then things started to shift. In a way I didn't expect. She began talking about the wedding, not in a dreamy, future-planning kind of way, but with real urgency. Like it needed to happen immediately. Like we were running out of time. She kept saying a baby needs stability, that she needed to know we were truly committed. When I agreed we should start planning, she pushed for a date within the next 2 months. It felt insanely rushed, but I figured she was just nesting, or whatever pregnant women do when they get anxious about the future. Then came the conversation about the house. This is where I started to feel something in my gut that I desperately tried to ignore. I wanted so badly for everything to be real, for this to be our happy ending. We were sitting at the kitchen table one night, looking at listings online. Olivia kept pointing out houses way above our budget. Places with 4 bedrooms, huge yards, in expensive neighborhoods. When I mentioned we couldn't afford something like that right now, she got quiet. Then suggested we use my savings for the down payment. I reminded her my savings were for both of us, for our future together. She smiled and said it was exactly for our future. But then she added something that made my stomach churn in a way I couldn't quite explain. She said the house should be in her name, just to be safe. When I asked what she meant by safe, she explained that if something happened to me, God forbid, she wanted to make sure she and the baby would be protected. That she'd have security no matter what happened between us. I sat there, trying to process it. On the surface, it almost made sense. People plan for worst-case scenarios all the time. But something about it felt deeply wrong. Like she was planning a future where I wasn't even part of the picture. Where I was just a wallet that might disappear. I told her I needed to think about it. She didn't push. Just kissed me on the cheek and said to take my time, but we needed to decide soon since she was already 8 weeks along, and we should get moving on things. Over the next couple of weeks, Olivia brought up the house constantly. Always framing it as protection for her and the baby. She started adding more conditions, wanting the wedding before closing on the house, wanting me to add her to my bank accounts just in case of emergencies, so she could access money if something happened to me. I felt this weird pressure building, like I was being backed into a corner, every conversation a step closer to some trap I couldn't see yet. But every time I voiced my concerns, she'd get emotional. She'd say she thought I wanted this family, or that after what we went through, she just needed to feel secure. And I'd immediately feel guilty for even questioning her. The real turning point came about 3 weeks after she told me about the pregnancy. I came home early from work one day, having forgotten my laptop on the kitchen counter. As I walked in, Olivia was on the phone in our bedroom. The door was halfway closed, and I could hear her voice carrying down the hallway. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, I swear. But then I heard my name, Ethan, and something in her tone made me freeze. What I heard next made my blood run cold. She was talking to her friend, Chloe. I heard her say I'd been ready to give her everything last time. The house, the ring, all of it. Then, she said, and then we lost the baby and everything just stopped. All the plans disappeared. There was a pause. Chloe said something I couldn't make out. And then Olivia laughed. Actually laughed. This time, she said, I'm not leaving anything to chance. Once the house is in my name and we're married, I'll figure out the rest. I stood there, frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding. I tried to understand what I was hearing. Tried to twist it, to make it make sense in some other way. But then Olivia uttered the words that absolutely destroyed everything I thought I knew about her. She told Chloe that I would never know the truth. And that even if things didn't work out between us down the line, at least she'd have the house. At least she'd have something to show for all of this. I quietly backed out of the apartment, walked to my car, and sat there for almost an hour. Trying to make sense of it. Trying to find any explanation that didn't mean what I thought it meant. The pieces started clicking together in the most horrifying way possible. Her sudden change of heart about having kids, after years of being adamantly against it. The insane urgency about the wedding and the house. Her insistence that everything be in her name. And most horrifyingly, she had never actually shown me any proof of this pregnancy beyond her word. Sitting there, I realized I'd never seen a doctor's appointment confirmation. Never been invited to an ultrasound. Never even seen the positive pregnancy test she claimed to have taken. I had just believed her. Because why wouldn't I? After everything we'd been through, why would she lie about something like this? That night, I came home and acted completely normal. I kissed her hello, asked about her day, made dinner. I didn't mention a word about what I'd heard, because I needed to know for sure before I did anything. I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to things I'd been ignoring. Like how Olivia wasn't experiencing any morning sickness, even though she claimed to be almost 12 weeks along. How she was still drinking coffee every single morning when she'd given it up completely during the first pregnancy because it made her nauseous. How her body hadn't changed at all. Not even a little bit. I suggested we go to her next doctor's appointment together. She made an excuse about her doctor being fully booked for weeks, that she'd have to reschedule anyway. When I offered to call the office myself and add my name, she got defensive. Said I was being controlling, that she needed space to handle her own medical care. I knew then, with absolute certainty, there was no baby. Olivia had watched how desperate I'd been during the first pregnancy, how willing I was to give her everything she wanted. And she decided to weaponize that against me. She'd watched me grieve, studied every single one of my reactions, and crafted a detailed plan to get exactly what she wanted. A house in her name. Financial security. A wedding. All on her terms. All using my money. With zero intention of actually having a child. The worst part wasn't even the lie itself. It was realizing that the person I'd loved and trusted for 4 years had looked at my pain, my genuine devastation over losing a child, and thought, this is how I get what I want. This is the key to everything. I felt sick. I felt betrayed. But most of all, I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner. For being so desperate to believe in the fairy tale, so eager for a second chance at fatherhood, that I'd ignored every single red flag waving right in front of my face. Now, I had a choice. I could confront her immediately, watch her scramble for excuses. Or, I could play along. Let her think her plan was working perfectly, and see exactly how far she was willing to take this lie. How deep the betrayal actually went. And honestly, after what she'd done, after how she'd weaponized the worst moment of my life, I wanted to see just how far she'd go before I pulled the rug out from under her. I decided to let Olivia believe her plan was perfect. For the next 2 weeks, I played the role of excited future father better than I ever had. Asking about baby names, showing her house listings I'd found, even suggesting we start shopping for nursery furniture on weekends. The whole time, I watched her lie straight to my face with a smile. The thing about knowing the truth is it changes how you see absolutely everything. Every time Olivia put her hand on her stomach and talked about the baby growing. Every time she made up some elaborate story about morning sickness or weird food cravings, I could see right through it. What shocked me most wasn't just that she was lying, but how good she was at it. How easily and naturally the lies came to her, like she'd been practicing. I started secretly documenting everything. Detailed notes on my phone about every conversation. Every time she refused to let me come to a doctor's appointment. Every inconsistency in her story. Because I knew when this finally came to a head, I'd need concrete proof that I wasn't crazy, that this wasn't just paranoia or cold feet. One night, about a week before we were supposed to meet with Nathan, the real estate agent Olivia had found, she brought up the paperwork for the house. She said we needed to get pre-approved for a mortgage, and that she'd already filled out most of the application with her information to save us time. She showed me the papers. I noticed immediately she'd listed herself as the sole owner on the title, and me as a co-borrower on the mortgage. Meaning, legally, I'd be responsible for paying for a house I wouldn't actually own. When I pointed this out, she had an explanation ready. It was better for tax purposes, or some other vague financial reason she couldn't quite explain. I told her it sounded fine, and I'd sign whatever she needed. The relief that washed over her face was almost sad. Like she'd expected me to fight her, but was absolutely thrilled I was still playing along. The truth is, I had zero intention of signing anything. But I wanted to see how far she'd push this before I pulled the rug out. I wanted to watch her walk right up to the finish line before I showed her it was never real. A few days later, Olivia suggested we meet with Nathan to discuss our options and timeline. I agreed immediately. Even offered to take the afternoon off work so we could go together. That seemed to genuinely make her happy, like everything was finally falling into place. The morning of the meeting, I went to my bank and spoke with someone about my accounts. I didn't move any money or close anything. I didn't want to tip her off. But I wanted to understand exactly what would happen if Olivia somehow got access to my savings. The banker assured me that without my explicit written consent and signature, she couldn't touch a single dollar. That gave me some much-needed peace of mind. When I got to Nathan's office that afternoon, Olivia was already there, sitting in the waiting area. A folder full of printouts, notes, paint samples. She looked more excited than I'd seen her in months. Like this was the moment she'd been working toward for so long. Like she was about to win. We sat down with Nathan. He started going through the whole process, talking about down payments, interest rates, closing costs. Olivia nodded along like she understood everything perfectly, occasionally squeezing my hand like we were in this together, a real team. Then Nathan asked about our timeline. Olivia said we wanted to move as fast as possible, that we were expecting a baby and needed to be settled before the due date. I watched Nathan's face light up with congratulations, while I sat there feeling absolutely nothing but cold clarity. After about 30 minutes, Nathan excused himself to print some documents in the back office. The moment he left the room, I turned to Olivia. "I need to show you something," I said, "before we go any further with this." She looked confused, but curious, maybe a little nervous. I pulled out my phone. But instead of the voice recording she might have expected, I opened a folder of screenshots I'd taken over the past week. See, after I overheard that phone call with Chloe, I'd waited for Olivia to leave the apartment. Then, I'd gone through her laptop, which she always left open on the kitchen table. And I'd found everything. The messages between her and Chloe where they planned this whole thing out. The conversations about how to handle me, how to make sure I stayed convinced. Even a draft text she'd never sent, where she joked about how easy it was to manipulate someone who actually wanted to be a father. I'd screenshotted everything, backed it up to my cloud. Now, I showed it all to her, slowly scrolling through message after message while her face went from confused, to pale, to absolutely horrified. The color drained from Olivia's face so fast I thought she might actually pass out right there in Nathan's office. For a solid 10 seconds, she just sat in complete silence, staring at my phone like it was a weapon pointed directly at her chest, like her whole world was collapsing. Then she tried to speak. Opened her mouth, closed it again. Finally, she managed to say I was taking it out of context, that Chloe had been giving her bad advice, and she was just venting to a friend, that she didn't mean any of it the way it looked in text form. I let her talk. Let her stumble through excuse after excuse, watching her try to reconstruct some version of reality where she wasn't the villain. When she finally stopped, I asked her one simple question that I already knew the answer to. I asked if she was actually pregnant. She looked at me with wide, desperate eyes. "Of course I am," she said. "I can't believe you'd even ask me that. How dare you question something so serious?" And I told her to prove it. Right now. Call her doctor and have them send over the ultrasound photos. Show me any medical documentation at all. Anything that proved this was real. Olivia's face crumpled. She started crying. Real tears, this time. "I did it because you wouldn't commit otherwise, Ethan," she sobbed. I was scared of losing everything. And I realized that in her mind, she'd actually justified this to herself. Convinced herself that manipulating me was somehow necessary or reasonable. That lying about a pregnancy was just a tool to get what she deserved. I stood up. Nathan, who had just walked back in looking extremely uncomfortable and confused, now watched me. "We won't be needing your services after all," I told him. "There's been a misunderstanding. We need to leave." Olivia grabbed my arm, hard. She begged me not to do this. Don't throw away our future over what she called a misunderstanding. I looked at her. Really looked at. This person I'd spent 4 years of my life with. This person I'd been ready to marry, to build a family with. I lost a child, Olivia, I said. I mourned a baby that I loved, and you saw that as an opportunity. She tried to argue, said she'd lost the baby too, so her grief was just as real as mine. But we both knew that wasn't true. Her grief had lasted maybe a month, while mine had nearly destroyed me for half a year. I walked out of that office. Olivia followed me into the parking lot, still crying, still trying to convince me we could work through this, that couples therapy could fix it, that she'd do anything to make it right if I just gave her another chance. I got in my car. She stood at the driver's side window, saying I was throwing away our future, that everything she'd done was because she loved me and wanted security for us. I rolled down the window just enough to tell her there was no future anymore. Not for us. That I refused to build a life on top of a lie this massive and calculated. She asked where I was going. I told her I was going home to pack her things. She had until the end of the week to find somewhere else to stay. The look on her face was pure shock. Like she genuinely believed that even after being caught red-handed, I'd somehow forgive her. That we'd just move forward like nothing happened. Over the next few days, Olivia tried absolutely everything. She called and texted constantly, showed up at my apartment at weird hours. Even got her mom involved, who called to tell me I was being too harsh, that young couples make mistakes, and I should be more forgiving. But I didn't budge an inch. The truth is, I could have maybe forgiven a lot of things. People lie, people make mistakes. But not this. Never this. Not using the worst pain of my life as a blueprint for manipulation. Not faking a pregnancy and planning to fake another miscarriage just to secure a house and a wedding ring. About a week after everything fell apart, I got a text from Chloe, Olivia's friend, apologizing for her part in it. She said she'd told Olivia from the very beginning that the plan was wrong and would blow up in her face. But Olivia had insisted I'd never find out, that I was too trusting and too desperate to be a father to ever question her. I didn't respond. Honestly, I didn't care anymore about apologies or explanations. My anger had faded into something colder, clearer. Just a deep understanding that I'd dodged something absolutely catastrophic. I spent the next few months rebuilding my life for the second time in a year. But this time, it was different. I wasn't mourning a child. I was mourning the person I'd thought Olivia was, and accepting that she'd never actually existed. That the woman I'd loved had always been partially a fiction. Looking back now, I'm genuinely grateful I overheard that phone call with Chloe. Grateful I went through her messages. Grateful I didn't sign those papers. Because if I hadn't, I'd probably be sitting in a house I didn't own, married to someone who saw me as nothing more than a means to an end, wondering why I felt so empty and trapped. And the scariest part? I would have never known why. I would have spent years trying to fix something that was broken from the very beginning. What would you have done in my situation?